So hello, everyone, and welcome to the Confederation Club's Waterloo 2020 Fall Winter webinar series. So our goal is to enrich Canadian digital social life. So we thank you for joining us on what should be a very interesting webinar. My name is Jerry Zhang. I am the current president of the Confederation Club and your host for today's meeting. So our guest speaker is Dr. Dorothy Nyambi, who will be introduced shortly. I will also be joined by Steve Cage, our speakers committee chair, and the Q&A moderator. So before we dive in, just a few housekeeping tips. So we are recording this webinar. So you will be able to share and listen to it on our website at confederationclub.ca, on Facebook page, on our YouTube channel, and this webinar is currently is live on Facebook. So we also plan to poll and survey the audience as well. So we encourage you, of course, to participate. Your response is completely anonymous, and we do appreciate your input. So if you wish to submit a question, pop it into this Q&A question box, and Steve, our speakers committee, and the moderator will take your questions. We will attempt to get all of your questions as time allowed. So please ensure that your questions are appropriate. So I'll briefly talk about Confederation Club. So Confederation Club is funded in 1976. As you can see, Joe Clark was the first speaker, and we have a lot of Canadian politicians came to our club over the past 44 years. But of course, we also have hundreds of uh, 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 speakers from all aspects of Canadians' contemporary life. In last month, on the very top, that's Mr. Brian Porter. We were very pledged. Well, we were very privileged to have a Brian to talk about Sir John A. Macdonald. So all of our impressive speakers list in the past 44 years is available on our website. We centralized. Our club is located in Waterloo. Waterloo is the Canadian Innovation Hub and High Tech Center. So without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Dorothy Nyambi. So Dorothy started her career as a medical doctor. She has more than 25 years in the international and entrepreneurial sectors, working underground in developing countries in long-term development and humanitarian aid. So prior to joining MEDA, she was the executive vice president of the African Institute for Mathematical Science. She worked for U.S. Peace Corps before, WHO before, and United States Agency for International Development before, spanning work across Africa, North America, Eastern Europe, Asia, Latin America, Caribbean, and the Middle East. So Dr. Nyambi is passionate about gender equality and inclusive. She's a lifelong focus to ensure women and girls are not left behind. She's also a advocate for blended finance initiatives in the international development sector and the champion of women's rights. Uh, Dorothy is bilingual in English and French. She has a tested C-suite experience across executive roles and organizations. So tonight, we're very fortunate to have Dr. Dorothy Nyambi speaking at our club. So Dorothy, take it away.
Okay. No, thank you very much, Jerry, for this warm welcome. I just want to put my slide deck on that I'm going to be using. So if you just give me 1 minute, I'll do that. Yes, so no, so Jerry, thank you so much for inviting me to come to the Federation Club of Kitchener-Waterloo. Again, my name is Dorothy Nyambi, and I want to say good evening to all those who are listening, to this webinar. When I got the invitation from the Confederation Club, I have to say I was very excited, but also really humbled for two reasons. First, because MEDA as an organization, and I'll be talking about MEDA a little bit later, we are all about business solutions to poverty. And when I think about, the mission of the Confederation Club and the kind of work that I'm sure many of you who are listening into this call do, I am really humbled because I know that there is a lot of expertise, there's a lot of knowledge in terms of how to use business in times of peace, in times of crisis, to be able, to turn things around. So thank you again, Jerry, for inviting me. I would like to just start, by saying, let's see if I can get my slide to move here. I work for MEDA, the Mennonite Economic Development Associates. And for those of you who don't know MEDA, we are 65 years on and counting. So, my apologies. I seem to be having, Jerry, I don't know if you can confirm if you can see my slide. I just don't seem to be able
I
to.
can see your slides.
You can see?
Yeah, it's the 67 years and accounting page. Yep, it's
Okay.
moving. It's
It's
good.
moving? Okay. So MEDA with 67 years and counting. And, I won't dwell a lot about our vision, and our mission is to create business solutions to poverty. But I really want to talk a little bit about who we are as an organization. We're an international economic development association, which was certainly founded out of Mennonite roots. But, and we really welcome anyone else who believes, in our vision and mission, and that, and they share our values, that they're absolutely welcome to join us. MEDA for 67 years going, started in 1953. So this is just a little bit of a timeline of the big things that have happened. Like every other charity, benevolent organization that starts, it normally tends to start a little bit informally, and then gradually it will formalize. So in 1953, it might seem like a long time ago, but time does pass fast. A group of Mennonite people based in North America decided to help Mennonites who were in Paraguay. And it started with investment in what was then known as the Sorona Dairy. And I wouldn't go into a lot of depth about where the Sorona Dairy is, but the story of the Sorona Dairy is testament to the fact that, business solutions as an option for helping people get themselves out of poverty actually does work. So from 1953 till about 1969, the founders themselves were running the organization. Then by 1969, MEDA got its first full-time executive director. In 1973, got registered in the US as a US charity. And as you will notice, MEDA was registered in the US much earlier than it was registered in Canada. So it became official as a US charity before it became a Canadian charity, and registered since 1983. So different things have happened at MEDA. But one thing that is also important in terms of the timeline and our history is in 2011, when, the Sorona Asset Management, an investment firm for profit was created. So it was spun off from MEDA, and Sorona Asset Management has now been going on for almost 10 years and has taken on the impact investment functions of what MEDA was doing internally back at the time. So MEDA is one of the first organizations in the international development space that started doing impact investment. We're not using the word at that time, but now it's a very common word. And that was using business solutions as the intervention to address poverty. And different things have happened. We just finished, a fundraising campaign in 2019, and as we speak now in 2020, we're just about to start our next strategic direction. So MEDA again is one of the organizations I consider that we are at the intersection of faith, business, and development. And it's really important. And I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later in this presentation, because the fact that we're able to bring faith and business together to actually leverage that for a development intervention is really unique. And I think it is something that, we're going to see how best we can ensure that many others who can do it can get into the space, because it's one of the absolute ways, to make a difference. As an organization, we do have what we call our theory of change. Why do we believe that, business solutions, are going to be able to address poverty? And we do that because we believe that if we bring a blended finance approach and the business and technical expertise, that our teams both in North America and in the field have, and that combination, working in what we now have narrowed down to the agri-food system sector, doing so, being very clear about our roots, and our origins, that we are going to be able to create decent work and sustainable economic growth, for many, many around the world. And we really say it has been tested, and now our job is to make sure that we can do this as a systems level and be able to take it to scale. As part of what we do, I just want to jump over and talk a little bit about the Sustainable Development Goals. These are the goals that were set globally at the United Nations for everybody to make sure that from Canada to Myanmar to Somalia to Nicaragua, every country in the world is held accountable for that. And most of the time, instead of talking about the 17 goals, I normally say that there are 5 Ps, for us to be able to move forward as a world, whether we're dealing with COVID or we're dealing with a tsunami, we're dealing with war, we really need to think about people, the people of this world. We need to think about peace. We need to ensure that, there's partnerships. We want to save our planet and want to ensure prosperity. So a lot of what MEDA does is how do we actually bring prosperity to those who might ordinarily not have the means, to get themselves out of poverty. So the Sustainable Development Goals, again, is one of the things that we as MEDA do as an organization, or we are aligned to ensure that the work we do is going to be recognized by the countries where we work and the global community, part of which we're a part of. Okay. Something else that I just want to put off, and before I will actually come to what's happening with us now and the changes. Over the years, there's certainly been different kinds of shifts, but this one was of keen interest to me for several reasons. If we look at the world in 1992, among the top 10 countries, that create opportunity, Canada was one of those countries. And then by 2008, other countries began to emerge, and Canada was no longer among the top 10. And the projections, and these projections were done prior to COVID. So this might have changed. These projections were done prior to COVID. The projections for 2024, we see that, there's different global powers are emerging. The growth of China is evident. There's certainly a certain amount of stagnation in the West. Canada has disappeared from the top 10, countries for that creates opportunity. As I said, we have emergence of new players, Brazil, Indonesia, but also really remarkably that over this 20-year period, we still do not have any African country represented in the top 10 areas or countries in the world where we see economic opportunity. Okay. So with that said, the topic for my conversation today is about, entrepreneurship in a time of change. And absolutely the big elephant in the room for all of us is, the COVID-19 that came on us, expected or unexpected, early 2020. And, this picture for me really depicts the fact that, the whole world all of a sudden we all were engulfed in masks, and people were working from home. Women in particular had a double burden of working from home, taking care of the family, taking care of children. And so this picture certainly represents what is typical, I'll say, in North America, but it absolutely does not depict what definitely is happening in the parts of the world we refer to as emerging economies, developing countries, or the global south. But absolutely, COVID-19 has been transformational and has really uh, shaped how we're going to be thinking moving forward, including us at MEDA. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So in terms of just the world has gone through past periods when they've had severe things happen. And when those things happen, and I just want to go back to the Second World War. After the Second World War, for those of us who remember who did that history, the United States put out what they call the Marshall Plan. And over the recent past, there's been talk, do we need a Marshall Plan for international development? Do we need a Marshall Plan to deal with the COVID situation? But what is really clear is that we need a business economic plan, because just granting an aid is not going to do it much more for us. One of the things that is really clear is that a lot of the developing countries where organizations like us, MEDA, working, agriculture still plays a very important role. In terms of the number of people in those countries who are involved in agriculture, we're looking at 60 to 80% of the population involved in some form of agriculture. We're also looking at the fact that if we can do something and intervene in this sector and help people do better, it might be one of the best ways, if they look at it in a business lens, to get themselves out of poverty. So MEDA's focus, as we move forward, is certainly in the agribusiness sector, but we're doing so because when we listen to the ground where the needs are, those countries are also telling us that that's what they want to invest in. That's what they want to be able to do so that their people can feed themselves, but also be able to earn a good living, have good jobs, create jobs in the process of doing so. So agriculture is going to play an important role. So a little bit about MEDA's projects around the world. We work in several different project countries, and we do both what we call our market systems work, and then we also have countries where we actually have just impact investment projects. But as we move forward, we're working towards bringing those two together. One of the countries where we work in is in Nigeria. And in Nigeria, we work in the northern part, of Nigeria, working with women who are in the soy business, who are also in the peanuts, groundnuts work in northern Nigeria. And what we want to do is to help these women to ensure that they are linked to the middle, to the lead firms, to the aggregators, so that if they produce, that production actually goes within a value chain that they're able to earn decent wages out of it and earn a good income. So we work in northern Nigeria and other parts of Africa, which I will not go absolutely at the question period. I'll be happy to take any questions specifically about some of the work that we do. The other place where we actually work that I would like to talk a little bit about is in Nicaragua. We have what we call our TechnoLinks projects in Nicaragua. And despite the COVID situation and everything that is happening in Nigeria, in Nicaragua, Myanmar, irrespective of where we are, our teams in the field, our colleagues in the field, the clients, the businesses we work with, to help them grow their businesses, uplift themselves and uplift others, have been going on and they've been working. Safety has been the first thing. Safety, health precautions, personal protective equipment, we've not neglected that. It's really important. But in lots of the countries where we work, unlike in North America, people have to go out to work. They don't have the luxury of being able to work from home. If you're working in agriculture or you're working in manufacturing, chances are that you have to go out to work. If you are doing a small business and you need to trade to be able to put food on your table the next day, people have to go out to work. So the experience of the people in the countries where we are working has certainly been dramatically different from those of us, who are here in North America. We do have staff, from MEDA in all these countries, at the local level. And for us, it's again really important. And the local staff are all local nationals, so they understand their context, they understand the rules, they're able to make sure that everything we do is in line with what needs to happen locally. So just coming back to Nicaragua, we know that in Central Latin America, Nicaragua is one of the poorest countries. Um, Agriculture makes up about 19% of its GDP. So our TechnoLinks project, that is in Nicaragua, is working in agribusiness. And we're really excited because this project has equipped many more women with the tools and the knowledge, to help them have their businesses thrive. Through the TechnoLinks project in Nicaragua, we're supporting about 35,000 women and men, smallholder farmers in 85 agribusinesses, cooperatives, and public institutions. And by increasing their awareness and their capacity to deliver productive and environmentally sustainable food, in many ways, we're acting in a manner that would allow that even after the MEDA project is done, that project will be part of the system in Nicaragua. So that's an example of some of what we do in a country like Nicaragua. Then I'll move over to Myanmar. We also work in Myanmar. And in Myanmar, we all know that the economy there is rapidly changing. It is one of the most important actors in terms of potential for growth in Southeast Asia is the country of Myanmar. So while women play a very significant role in agriculture in the country, very little of the income comes to them. So women tend to work very hard and the aggregators, and as the value addition happens, then more men come into the chain. So we're doing a lot of work to make sure that we can build through that chain, we can ensure that many more women are participating. So our work in Myanmar is really exciting. And one of our clients, Awa, who is on the right side of the picture here, is an example of one of our partners who benefited from the training that we offered. And through that training, she was able to move from the traditional farming methods to higher yielding, more productive farming methods. After she participated in the MEDA training that was being offered in Myanmar. So again, I just want to say, in times of change, in times of COVID has come with a lot of change, and there's no doubt about it. There are other issues of racial, social justice. There's no time that the world has had to deal with so many different compounding factors. But if we go back to the Marshall Plan in 1945, we've also learned that in times of a lot of turmoil, business, entrepreneurship, being able to look at the opportunities and really forge is something that has actually helped people come out of poverty. So we're really encouraged at MEDA to say, despite the COVID situation, despite the different lockdowns and everything, the fact that we are focused on agriculture, agribusiness, agri-food systems, that's one of the value chains that was hugely affected, by the lockdown itself. And that is globally, not just in the areas where we work. We've actually chosen that, we are going to upend, the work that we need to do. We're going to double down. We need to do more. We need to do more. We need to strengthen the businesses, the agri-businesses in the global south, so that people are not only able to be food self-sufficient, but they can absolutely supply for others and everything. So looking at the things as we move forward, what I can say is that we believe that when we use the tools that are at our disposal to be able to support, those who want to help themselves, it is really important, as we say at MEDA, that the work we do is about helping people, give them a hand up and not a handout. So by helping someone run their own business, do well, they can then do well for themselves, they can create opportunities for others, they can then go into decent jobs, decent work. And we believe that that is so critical. And if there's any time when that has been needed, We think that in this COVID time, in this time of big, huge social unrest, it is so important, extremely important, that people don't feel left out or left behind. And so our next strategic direction is about towards an equal world. Because going back to the SDGs, for us to move forward as a global community, we got to have peace. There's got to be shared prosperity. And it is that sense of peace, shared prosperity, people, planet, that we are all going to be able to continue to be what I call responsible citizens. So I think, without much ado, I want to leave it open for questions, and absolutely excited again to be here. I would like to end by saying, if you go to the Confederation Club website, the way they introduced me, I was pretty tickled about it. They said, the Dr. CEO behind the Mennonite Faith Charity Group empowers businesses and entrepreneurship. So it had lots of words, but it was really significant. It had a lot of meaning for me. So don't know who did it, but I'm here. I'm ready to answer your questions. And over to you, Steve. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Well, thank you, Dr. Nyambi. We will now move to the question and answer part of the webinar. And a number of club members have pre-submitted questions for Dr. Nyambi. If you'd like to ask a question, please go to the question and answer function of the webinar. And I see that we already have one question that's come through electronically, but I'll start with one that was pre-submitted. MEDA initial investment projects were in Paraguay, South America, but are now more heavily focused in Africa. With limited resources and so much need throughout the world, how does MEDA prioritize where it gets involved?
No, great question, Steve. I think the fact that we started in Paraguay and we are no longer there, it's an extremely good news story. I think, we need to work. And what that demonstrates is that the intervention and the nature of the intervention is actually sustainable. Because if you're working and helping and partnering with any person, there has to be a time when you can let them go off on their own. So I would like to say that we did the job in Paraguay, and that job is done. There is now actually a MEDA Paraguay run by Paraguay, nationals that is still affiliated to MEDA. But that is the ultimate. That is how you work yourself out of a job, because then the job, those who you have, then they take on the job. So it is absolutely a good news story that we are no longer in Paraguay. I think I'll be totally worried about that. But then we're in Africa, I think, because if you look globally where the need is, about 80% of the needs, if you look at the poorest countries in the world, the bottom, 100 or so, about 80% of those countries are in sub-Saharan Africa. And at MEDA, we are committed to working and trying to go where the greatest need is.
Excellent. Okay, the next question. What is the biggest challenge MEDA is facing during this pandemic? And what is your recovery strategy?
Okay, wow. I think, when I think about MEDA as a not-for-profit organization, I first want to say all not-for-profit organizations, even before the pandemic, there's certain things that I can say almost central to what their struggle is, whether that not-for-profit is in Canada or that not-for-profit is working internationally, is based elsewhere. And the big thing for not-for-profits, number one, is usually the funding. I will call it, there's funding that is always an issue. The second thing for every not-for-profit organization that is an issue is just mission driven, right? How do you stay on mission and you don't drift? What is etc. and everything. And the third one is normally, how do you build your networks and do your work in a way that you continue to be credible and relevant? So with COVID, I don't know that any of those have fundamentally changed. I think those three things will always continue to hold for anybody in this sector. But what has now overlaid with it is the stress, the challenges that globally this is happening. And the big part, if you think about funding, for the first time, the world is dealing with a global pandemic. So normally it will be a tsunami somewhere else, an earthquake somewhere else. But right now in Canada, we all need to worry about what's happening in Canada. And we have to recognize it, that, it's much more difficult now to say, I'm going to take care of somebody in Ethiopia when I have somebody in Scarborough who is homeless or who needs something. So I think that's the difference. And then in terms of what's our strategy, I think our strategy is just really making sure that our local partners, that we're listening to them, we're working with them as closely as possible, our clients in the field, they know what will work for them best, and continue to make sure that our supporters here, we understand what they may also be going through, because it's a reality. And with that in mind, begin to think, how do we reshape our programs so that we can do the best we can with what we have? And in that way, also, how do those on the ground engage themselves and begin to come to the table? So it's an opportunity in disguise in different ways.
Excellent. We'll go online. We've got a question here. Listeners asking, can you give us a simple case study? How do you find potential entrepreneurs, evaluate the chances of success, provide funding, supply expertise to help the person be successful?
Okay. Yep. No, great question. I think that's from David Harmon. So in the programs, when we work as MEDA, as I said, many not-for-profit organizations, when they go to work in the field, they deal with civil society. We deal with businesses, smallholder farmers, whether they're running a business, aggregators. So as part of the work we do, when we have the grant funding or the unrestricted funding to go into the country, we actually have an office on the ground. So we have locals who are working on the ground, who are able to identify the businesses and within the value chain, whether it's rice, whether it's cassava, whether it's banana, where we're working. So we count a lot on our local staff, our local teams, to be able to do that assessment and identify those businesses we work with. And the work we do with our businesses, it's not about giving them a grant. It is something where we go in with some of the money, they come in with some of the money. So we're not giving out money without participation from the business. And that is at the market systems level. Move a little bit forward to impact investment, where we actually invest and some of that money gets, not some of it, the money gets refunded. So we are able to then take that money and invest elsewhere, which is the model of Paraguay. When we started in Paraguay, we invested in Paraguay, and that money in Paraguay is like a green fund. From the first $50,000 in Paraguay in 1953, we are now at about $25 million of that green fund. And we use it, to leverage it for the market systems, what we do. And so it's money that is paid back and it's money that comes back and that we keep reinvesting.
Fantastic. We'll go to another question online. Some donor countries have linked funds to controversial social policies, example and notably birth control. Understandably, such policies may be sensitive topics internally amongst target countries. How does MEDA navigate this without stepping on toes? Should diplomacy be intervening?
Okay, no, absolutely. Thank you. That was Tom Hiller. Yeah, I think, that is where one organization, you cannot do everything. So we go in and we are going in with business solutions to poverty. There are other organizations, Tom, whose job is to work around those issues. So if we are working with women and we feel that, the women need that kind of service, then we need to find a partner who deals with that. MEDA as an organization, we focus on the business solutions. We look at the individual as a whole, but those are policy issues, and we then partner with the policy players, who may be local or international, to deal with that aspect of it.
Next question. We know there are many charity groups that have been working in Haiti. Why are there still so many Haitians that cross our border and claim irregular immigration status?
Yep. I think that speaks so much to the fact that the intervention that needs to happen in any situation, in Canada, in Haiti, in the United States, it doesn't matter where, in Timbuktu, Azerbaijan, that intervention has to be holistic. There's not one solution that can address everything that is needed. So whilst MEDA goes in and we're looking at the businesses, there are other organizations that need to be looking at the enabling environment. that need to work on the policy issue. And because if we don't do that in a cohesive manner, people will continue to leave, because what helps people to stay is that enabling environment where they can see prosperity for themselves and they can see the future for themselves and their children. And an organization like MEDA, we are part of that bigger pie, and we are calling on others that let's work together. So if we work together cohesively, then Haitians would not need to leave. But that's work that is ongoing that we need to do and do it better.
Excellent. Okay. Next question online. With a wide variance in literacy, please share some of your experiences around bridging the literacy gap in the context of explaining how to use and maintain equipment, etc., and even how to run a business, however small.
Yeah, literacy is a very interesting thing in terms of how to run a business. I don't know if anybody on this call has traveled to Africa, and I want to use Africa because I come from Cameroon. I know Africa. And if you see a 10-year-old girl selling tomatoes in the market, and you give her a $10 bill, she doesn't need a calculator, a phone, or anything. She can just look at her tomatoes, she'll calculate the change and give it to you. So, the myth about, the business savvy is something that you learn and you must go pick it up, in a business school. Sure, there's value add in that. But I think there's that innate capacity that extremely poor people have to be entrepreneurial. If there's any group of people that know what it means to be entrepreneurial, I think it's the poor. And so when we go, we need to capitalize on what they already have and not try to bring what we think is the best and the only way, because they do have indigenous methods and ways of doing that are just as good and through which they've been surviving and growing, along the way.
Great. Okay, so the next question. You have impressive international experience. Can you compare how effective Canada is vis-a-vis the United States or other countries? What best practices should we be taking particular note of? And what are we doing that others might benefit from to get better results?
Okay. First I want to say that Canada is very highly respected, in the development world, in the development field. We, as Canadians, we're one of the countries where we take time when we go out to work with our partners in the field. We want to understand, we want to know. And I think that comes through our Canadian organizations, us all as Canadians. So I think that is something that speaks for itself. Definitely the international feminist development policy, it's a big one that has resonated across the world due to just the way women find themselves at this particular time, this generation in history. So Canada is leading in that, and it's coming through in terms of the work that we are doing, different organizations, the focus and that. I think, whilst that is happening, there's also opportunity for us as Canadians to see what can we do a little bit differently. And one of the big issues has to do with direction and control. I know Senator Omnivar is not on this call, or she might be, but she's actually going to be putting in a personal members bill, because if we don't look at that, the way Canadian funding, our tax money goes into international development work, it creates a situation where we have to be in so much control that sometimes we get looked at as being very colonial in our approach, very directive and everything. So it's a little bit contradictory to who we are as Canadian, and yet the legal obligations we have with the funds we receive make us behave that way. So I think if there's one thing that we can learn from others, and I think the US, they've localized, they've decentralized how their funding is acquired. A lot of it happens in the countries on the ground. The European Union, the DFID, a lot of the G20 countries, they've really decentralized and making sure that that localization of the Paris Accord is actually happening.
Excellent.
Canada is well respected.
Good to hear. Good to hear.
Yes.
One of our online viewers is saying, MEDA sounds very much like a miniature IFC, International Finance Corporation, with the same development objectives, etc. Other than size, how does what you are doing differ from the IFC in terms of objectives?
Yes. So I think I'll definitely say, other than IFC, we are very practical. We are hands-on. We get down to make sure that the business get done. There is less bureaucracy, and we actually use what I call a market systems approach. So IFC is investing in just the investment side of things. And so, but we say the investment is a tool that we bring when we look at the whole system and use that lens and see where investment fit. So two things. We use a market system approach to bring investment, so we differ from IFC. And secondly, we're very practical. We get down, we get to the ground, we work and go to where those who are hard to reach and where those aggregators can meet them. So we're reaching a level of society that IFC hardly can reach. So I'll let anyone at IFC challenge me on that.
Great. Uh, how big a budget does MEDA have, and where do you obtain most of your fundraising?
Hmm. So the question about budget, before I even answer it, I think international organizations really do need to stop defining themselves by the size of their budget. That's the first shift that international organizations need to make. We need to be able to define ourselves by the results of the work that we do, the kind of work that we do, right? So, because I can have $1 million, and how I build my programs and everything, I'm reaching and doing a lot of work, the nature of the intervention. So I think the myth about the budget of an organization is what defines it. We need to reverse that. That's number one. And then number two is that, and then I'll still go ahead to say, right now we're at between 35 and 40, 35 million to 40 million Canadian annually as a budget. So that's just the budget. But my message here is that organizations should not be judged by the size of their budgets. That's not the most important thing. We need those budgets to go get results. Let the results drive what is a great and big organization. And then you say, how much money do you need to get you there? And everything. So right now we do have our private supporters. We have the institutional donors, Global Affairs Canada. We have from foundations, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, MasterCard Foundation. But I say, if you go to our website, certainly you'll see all our funders. The British government, we receive funding from the Australian government. So really have a lot of partnership with these donors who recognize the nature of the work that we do.
Excellent. Next question. Interfaces among the technology industry often assist in the identification and delivery of services. How does MEDA develop partnerships?
Yeah, great question. The partnerships that we have, I'll say maybe of two different levels. We have whom we call strategic partners. They're partners who either we're working in the same sector, we have an additive or multiplier effect. We may or may not be doing a project together, but we are within that same ecosystem, that same space. So those are some of our strategic partners. Then we have what we call our implementing partners, those with whom we're actually delivering the work on the ground with. And with the implementing partners, we have them through the projects that we develop, so some of them we can co-design the projects with them. Others, we might be able to approach them after we have the funding to be able to do the work. But those partners are both in the global north and some in the global south. Some are universities, civil society, business networks, and so.
Excellent. It's a question online that I missed earlier. What was Dr. Nyambi's reason for leaving medicine in Cameroon to work on international development?
Okay. Yeah, so that's the question for me is, first I want to say that, once a medical doctor, always a medical doctor. It never leaves you. So that part never leaves me. But I think for me, it was, growing up in Africa, I always wanted to be a pharmacist. Somehow I ended up doing medicine because later on I realized that medicine was different from pharmacy. But when I became a doctor, it was almost, and when you work in the developing world, you're almost like you're in the bottom of the stream and everybody just keeps falling and there's only so much help you can do. And after about 10 years of doing that, I had a choice. I could either become, I no longer worry about death because, if 10 women come and you can only help one, it may die. Or I could go back upstream and say, what can I do to stop so many people from falling sick so we can even build the healthcare system? So I think for me, it was that desire to stop being a downstream medicine where you actually wait for sick people to come and meet you, and that desire to go upstream so I could say, what do I need to do to prevent people from falling down? And in that upward stream movement, I went into public health, international development. And whilst I am not practicing medicine today, I still believe that what I do is really upstream medicine. When you're a teacher, you're upstream medicine. When you're a business person, you're upstream medicine. You are doing things that allow for systems to be built and for systems to get stronger. So when a few do get sick, they can be taken care of.
Okay, excellent. So we just have a couple more questions, unless others pop up online. How is the present economic situation affecting your charity activities in Africa?
Yeah. So as I said, the pandemic in general is affected the whole world. So if before it will be Ebola crisis somewhere and people in Canada are healthy, we are okay, right? But this time, those dynamics have changed. So as I said earlier, we're trying to make sure that we can do the best we can with what we already have. We want to recognize that, you know, our donor base, especially our private donors, most of them are business people. They're affected in different ways by the pandemic for their own businesses. So we recognize that. So whilst our the contributions we get from our private donors continues to be stable, I think, you know, make no mistake, you know, we're really conscious of the fact that times have changed, times are different. Again, as I said, this is also opportunity for us to say, if we're raising funds in the global north, in Canada, Europe, North America, Australia, and so, what is there? There is bandwidth in Africa, in Latin America. So maybe this is also the opportunity for us to make sure that locally, that fundraising begins to happen. How do we support that from happening? So it is the funds that we have here, added to the funds that are raised locally, that gets to do the work. So I think it has created an opportunity for that thinking to actually be made concrete.
Excellent. And the final question, MEDA does some fantastic work all around the world. How can people make a charitable donation to your organization?
All right. I think on my own slide deck, you know, we have www.meda.org. Please, you know, if you can go to our website, again, it's www.meda.org. Our gift catalog, you know, it's very exciting. Our gift catalog is about supporting businesses. It's about helping entrepreneurs to lift themselves up and lift others so that we don't have to do it forever, so that they can then grow and take care of their own communities, just like we did in Paraguay. We don't need to be in Paraguay. And so if you go to www.meda.org and, you know, as Michael White, my colleague, reminded me, it is like, you know, give early and give often. So we're ready, and we want to just reassure you that, you know, we're great stewards of any funds that we receive. We make sure that, you know, we use it judiciously, the controls are in place, and it's so important that we actually see the results.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Nyambi. I will now pass you back to our host, Jerry Zhang, to formally thank you on behalf of the Confederation Club. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dorothy, for your passionate and visionary presentation, talking about MEDA, its mission, its inspiring projects. Thank you so much. On behalf of the Confederation Club, on behalf of our members, friends, we thank you for your speaking at our club at this webinar. Before we wrapping up this webinar, I'd like to remind everybody, when you close the Zoom window, meeting window, you will automatically receive a survey, and we thank you for your participation. Check our website, confederationclub.ca. We're going to announce our future webinar information on our website. So thank you, Dorothy, and thank you, everybody online. It was a great night. Bye.
Thank you also, Jerry, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everybody.
Yes, Merry Christmas to everybody. Okay. Bye for now.